On the night of April 14, 1912, the world witnessed one of the most infamous maritime disasters in history, the tragic sinking of the RMS Titanic. Built as a marvel of engineering, unmatched in luxury and scale, it was deemed unsinkable. Yet within hours of striking an iceberg, the mighty liner found her watery grave at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, taking more than 1,500 lives with her. Official reports tell us the Titanic sank due to a perfect storm of overconfidence, collapsible lifeboats, and a fatal icy collision. But was there more to the story? Over a century later, historians, scientists, and conspiracy theorists continue to revisit the unsolved mysteries surrounding the Titanic disaster. Icebergs, poorly executed warnings, and human error are the accepted causes. But a growing body of evidence tells us a different story, and it starts years before the ship even sets sail. Please adapt this chapter as is. To understand the Titanic's doomed voyage, we have to go back to her conception. The Titanic was one of 3 sister ships commissioned by the White Star Line, a company locked in fierce competition with its rival Cunard for dominance of the transatlantic passenger market. Bigger, grander, and sturdier. That was the goal. But accomplishing that required cost-cutting decisions. Decisions that, unbeknownst to the designers, would sow the seeds of disaster long before an iceberg ever came into view. Please adapt this chapter as is. The Titanic's construction at the Harland and Wolff shipyard was a massive undertaking. Over 3,000 workers toiled for 2 years to bring the ship to life. But amidst the towering steel and rivets, whispers of questionable practices grew louder. A 2017 investigation by metallurgists uncovered a shocking revelation. The steel used on the Titanic's hull and the rivets holding it together were not of the highest quality. In fact, much of the steel was brittle, a problem exacerbated by freezing temperatures in the North Atlantic. When struck by the iceberg, instead of bending, the steel fractured like glass. Those rivets, the very backbone of the ship, popped like buttons on an overstretched coat. But faulty construction wasn't the only invisible hand pushing the Titanic toward disaster. Of course, even without the fire, the iceberg is central to the story. Yet here's where another intriguing layer comes to the surface. New research suggests the Titanic's fate may have been sealed by celestial forces. In January 1912, just 3 months before her doomed voyage, a rare alignment occurred between the moon, the earth, and the sun. This alignment, known as a supermoon, created what scientists call a perigean spring tide, a phenomenon where tides are unusually powerful. These immense tidal forces caused an extraordinarily high number of icebergs to break free from Greenland's glaciers and float into the North Atlantic shipping lanes. What's more, the effect of the tide wasn't just limited to icebergs. Experts claim the currents and conditions that spring were unprecedented, pushing vessels like the Titanic unknowingly toward danger. Of course, even without the fire, the iceberg is central to the story. Yet here's where another intriguing layer comes to the surface. New research suggests the Titanic's fate may have been sealed by celestial forces. In January 1912, just 3 months before her doomed voyage, a rare alignment occurred between the moon, the earth, and the sun. This alignment, known as a supermoon, created what scientists call a perigean spring tide, a phenomenon where tides are unusually powerful. These immense tidal forces caused an extraordinarily high number of icebergs to break free from Greenland's glaciers and float into the North Atlantic shipping lanes. What's more, the effect of the tide wasn't just limited to icebergs. Experts claim the currents and conditions that spring were unprecedented, pushing vessels like the Titanic unknowingly toward danger. On the night of the tragedy, the environmental odds stacked against the Titanic didn't end there. In 2012, weather analysts uncovered evidence of an atmospheric distortion called superrefraction. This phenomenon, caused by extremely cold air layering over warmer ocean water, created a mirage-like effect on the horizon. It's theorized this optical illusion may have played havoc with the Titanic's lookouts, making the iceberg appear smaller or delaying its visibility until it was far too late. But perhaps the most chilling mystery of the Titanic is how close it came to being saved. Hours before Titanic struck her iceberg, the ship received several iceberg warnings from nearby vessels. However, these warnings never reached the bridge. Why? The Titanic's wireless operators were swamped with passenger messages, the Edwardian equivalent of text messages, meant to be sent across the Atlantic. A final warning sent from the SS Californian just minutes before the crash went unanswered as the Titanic's operator curtly dismissed it, prioritizing passenger telegraphs instead. Whether this was negligence or just the chaos of the situation is hotly debated. But either way, the missed message was arguably the final nail in the Titanic's coffin. Speaking of the SS Californian, her role in the tragedy remains highly controversial. The Californian was the nearest ship to Titanic, just a few miles away. Her crew reportedly spotted distress rockets but failed to respond in time, believing that the signals were celebratory rather than a call for help. Questions linger as to whether the Californian's captain, Stanley Lord, could have saved hundreds of lives had he acted sooner. Was it a simple misunderstanding? Or was Lord too hesitant, weighed down by his own fear of sailing near the very same icebergs? When we think of the Titanic, it's tempting to assign blame solely to human arrogance or icy waters. But as more is unearthed, the story grows infinitely more complex. Quality-compromising shortcuts in construction, an unchecked coal fire, astronomical phenomena, optical illusions, and fateful miscommunications, all intertwined into a web of circumstances so intricate, it seems almost impossible to comprehend. Was the Titanic sinking a preventable human tragedy or an inevitable collision of fate? The answer lies somewhere in the murky depths of the Atlantic, where steel fragments and unanswered questions rest in silence. As we continue to pick apart history's most famous shipwreck, the real lesson of the Titanic may not be about icebergs or shipbuilding. Instead, it's about the fragile line between human confidence and the unpredictable forces of nature. A line the Titanic unknowingly crossed, taking thousands of dreams down with her.